I've been involved with numerous organizations on campus at Cornell University. I currently run a group on campus called Lutheran Student Fellowship. I've also been involved in the G.K. Chesterton House, which is a Christian housing community. I worked for a little while for Christian Union, which is on campus. And I've spoken to some other groups like the Cornell Political Union, as well as the Crew chapter that's at Cornell University. And throughout the time that I have spent at Cornell, I've had a lot of conversations with more conservative students, as one who myself has conservative beliefs about things, specifically thinking about things like pro-life issues, as well as gender and sexuality issues. I have had a lot of conversations with students about how it is to how to navigate the Ivy League when you have views that differ significantly from the majority of the student population at that university, as well as the perspective that is going to be taught by the majority of the professors at that university as well. So I just want to say a couple things for any of you who are either currently Ivy League students or those who are considering attending an Ivy League university. The first thing I want to address is the question of, is there any reason to attend an Ivy League university? And I think that's a valid question, because when you go to an Ivy League university as someone who has values that differ significantly from many of the values that are going to be taught by many of the professors and held by many of the students, you may think, well, is it worth just going to college to battle, to have a battle on these various issues throughout my college experience? And certainly, I think it does take a certain kind of person to be able to navigate these things well in that kind of environment. But a lot of the students that I know are quite resilient. And I am speaking about students at Cornell, which is my experience because I live here and do work here. But I also have experience in conversations with students from across the Ivies as well. So I'm drawing on some discussions, conversations that I've had, and things that I've observed across the 8 Ivy League universities, as well as some other more elite universities that are kind of adjacent to that. But I think when you ask the question, should we have people who are, more conservative values going to Ivy League institutions, is it even really worth it? And I think there are some reasons that someone would want to do that, and some reasons why it may actually be worth it to do that. Now, the first of these is simply because as conservatives, it's kind of our goal to conserve things, okay? So, that's kind of, what the term means. So we want to conserve the institutions that our society has, and we want to use those institutions to promote what is true, what is good, and what is beautiful. And when you're looking at institutions in the United States, you've really got basically two different sets of institutions that are kind of the foundational ones for American society. And the first is the churches, probably specifically the mainline churches, and there's a whole other question about that there. But then you have the universities, and the Ivy League universities really are at the core of those institutions that have been there since really the founding of the United States and have served as an educational backbone for the leaders of society. So there is something about simply the principle of conservation to say that there is something that is good about conserving those institutions as much as you possibly can and using them for good. And the second is just that Ivy League institutions tend to be the places where those who are going to have the biggest impact in society tend to come from. And that's not just on the kind of liberal spectrum. So just look at politics as simply one example. It's not just that every major Democrat politician that is, has had a somewhat successful presidential run, say, is from an Ivy League institution, but the same is true about Republicans as well. If you look at the current candidates in the primaries right now, someone like Ron DeSantis has a degree from both Harvard and Yale. Vivek Ramaswamy has a degree from both Harvard and Yale. Donald Trump has a degree from UPenn. So while it's not the case that every successful person in broader society has an Ivy League education, there are opportunities in terms of influencing society that are going to be opened up through some of the connections that are going to be made through Ivy League institutions. And some of those opportunities, many of those opportunities are not necessarily going to be there through some other institution. So there's something beneficial about being able to have some kind of societal impact just because of the connections that you make there. So that's the question of, is it worth it to attend an Ivy League institution? And you have to obviously evaluate that kind of thing yourself, because you do have to be strong-willed, you have to be very convicted, and you have to be ready to recognize that you are going to be an outsider with your views. And I think that some people do better than that than others. So you have to think about yourself and really how well you think you would do in that kind of environment. But then there's the question of, how do you survive as an Ivy League student? How do you survive as one who has more, conservative values? And the first thing that I would say is, find yourself a group of like-minded students, and find yourself certain professors that do hold to similar values, because there are professors at really all of the Ivy League universities, at least there's somebody who has values that do line up with yours. So it's important to be able to connect with those individuals. Now, I do think it differs depending on the institution. So some of the colleges have some very clear, larger conservative groups. So I think about Princeton, Dartmouth would be the same way as well, that are a little bit more visible. So it's easier to get connected with those particular groups. And it's really important to have a group of people that you are able to really say what you think around. When you feel like you're walking on eggshells in most circumstances and many environments, it's really important to have that one group of people that you can be with and be able to just share what you really think about things and talk openly and honestly. So there are organizations on all campuses that do promote more conservative values about various things. Now, I will say this, that conservative students who have, say, pro-life values, sometimes, in my experience, they're quite disappointed when they start to join Christian organizations on campuses, because many of the students that are in those Christian organizations are more progressive on certain issues. So I say that just as kind of a warning, I suppose, for you, to say that if you're thinking about doing this and going to an Ivy League institution and you're looking at a Christian organization, don't necessarily think because that's a Christian organization, all of the students are going to have necessarily the same values. That's just kind of the reality on the ground that I found, and I've seen disappointment from multiple students. But it is, of course, going to be the case that, if you are in a Christian organization, you're certainly going to find more people there than you will in some other campus organizations who hold to, say, pro-life values or oppose the current perspective that tends to be prominent on gender issues and sexuality issues in our society. And then I want to say that it's really important to first just get to know people without sharing your opinions right away. And something that I have seen is that there is just there's kind of an assumption, and this is true about professors and students as well. Professors sometimes teach as if, well, of course, everybody's really progressive, and of course, nobody in here actually believes conservative things. But when you start to meet other students, if you are an Ivy League student, you have more conservative views, don't share your views right away. And by that, I don't mean hide your views, to be clear, because I don't think that that's a healthy thing either, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But something that I've seen is that students who have conservative values start to make friends, and they don't talk about, because they're just talking about other issues. And then once they develop some kind of a relationship with that other individual, they share what their beliefs are, and the other person is kind of like shocked. And sometimes the shock is, well, I thought conservatives were all evil, because in my, whatever area they grew up in, wherever they're from, and their community, their family, the people that they're around really all shared their same progressive values. And there is this unfortunate mistaken conception that if you're a conservative, you're, hateful and you're nasty. But if they can get to know you and then you start to share your views after you've already developed a relationship, that changes things quite a bit. In that there is then often going to be a more understanding of those ideas on behalf of people who have very different opinions. And so in some ways, the best thing that you can do to get people to listen to your ideas is to just show them that you are a human being, and you're a kind person, and you're somebody that can be trusted, and you start to share those views, and they start to look at you as the person that they know and care about, instead of just looking at you through the lens of your views and putting you in the box of you're one of those bad people. So that's something that I find to be very, very helpful. But then I also want to say this, because on the other end of things, I often see students who have conservative views, but will not share them at all. And I understand why that's the case. The reason that's the case is there is a fear of social ostracization. There is a fear of, the professors are going to say, treat them badly, or they're going to get worse grades because of what they believe. And there is a fear of not being able to get into the career field that they want to get into. Because if their views are known, that's going to cut off some of the social connections. And largely why you go to Ivies is, as much as for the education, really for the social connections that you're able to make there. So if those are difficult social connections and it can hurt your career, there is a motivation to really hide your views. And I've seen this on behalf of a number of students who have come to me and have shared their conservative views, but have done it as if they're telling me some kind of terrible secret. Like, don't tell anybody, but I really think this. And that really shouldn't be the case. That should absolutely not be the case in an American university, that there is this fear of just sharing what it is that you actually believe is true, good, and right. And if we let that fear kind of win out, right? If you let the fear of ever sharing your views win out, then you're never going to make a change. So the best thing that you can do is to be open about what you do think. Be clear about your values, but to do it in a way that is respectful of others, in a way that is not, name calling, but in a way that you can show value and honor to those you disagree with, but to share just your views honestly and clearly. Just say, well, this is what I think, and here are the reasons why I think the things that I do. Because if you want to impact culture and you want to impact society in a positive way, you're never going to do that if what you do is perpetuate this culture of fear that exists among, elite colleges and in many corporate organizations as well, of, well, I can't tell anybody my real views, so I'm just going to kind of be quiet and pretend like I really agree with everybody else, even though I don't. That's not going to make any change. There is a necessity in saying what you believe, but doing it in the proper way. So finally, I want to say, if you are an Ivy League student currently, or if you are looking into one of the Ivy League universities, I'm going to give you the opportunity to send me an email. If you do that, I can try to connect you with organizations that I know that are, across the campuses of the Ivies, as well as colleges like Stanford and MIT, other elite universities, kind of at that level. And if you email me, I will make sure to put you in contact with some groups and organizations where you can find those who are of like mind on these issues. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you found this helpful, and make sure you subscribe to the channel here as well as my podcast. God bless.